welcome to the Up Podcast, raw real talk on everything young parenting.
From self-care, co-parenting, and family planning, to balancing school, work, relationships, and goals.
Together, we're challenging society's assumptions and building a safe and supportive community for young parents.
One honest conversation at a time. So join us on the journey.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode from your favorite lived experience young parents. As always, you have your host Divine.
And I'm Brandy. And today we are going to be talking all things mom guilt and imposter syndrome. But we have a super special guest today. Her official name is Dr. Dedra Beckles, but I call her mom or mommy or whatever else you can think of. And so we're super excited to have her. Mommy, can you introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your journey into motherhood and what you're up to now today?
Absolutely. Hi, guys. First, I want to say how super excited I am to be here before I introduce myself. How super exciting it was to be invited by Brandy and Divine to this space to share with you all. And just really hopeful that this is something that hits a spot and plants a seed into the lives of moms as we navigate motherhood from feeling a sense of guilt to really giving ourselves a level of grace that we deserve as moms. So I am Dr. Dedra Beckles. I'm a board certified family physician. I am a teen mom health advocate and consultant. And one of my most prized roles, as Brandy said, is former teen mom and teen mom to this beauty right here in the middle. She only calls me mommy when she wants something. Normally it's mom or Mimi, but I will take them all. And so, yes, as Brandy said, I am her mommy. I became her mom when I was 15. So this podcast really resonates with the teen mom in me, and all of the topics really just hit sweet, soft spots in my motherhood journey. And so for today's purposes, I would love to share with you how my journey as a teen mom really did navigate those spaces from guilt to grace. So as a 15-year-old mom, I think most moms, no matter what age you are, can resonate with just this idea of really the worthiness of yourself as a mom. And so we can call it by many names. Imposter syndrome is something I think that's a blanket term that everybody understands. And so, you know, one of the things when I first found out I was pregnant, that was a really common thing was like, really? Like, who was off work today or out sick when the applications for motherhood were being reviewed? Because really, me? Like, how am I worthy to be somebody's mom? I am still in my spoiled girl era. I am, you know, the last thing I babysat was born in a cabbage patch, like me as a mom. And so that I don't think is uncommon for anybody. I don't think when I hear it across the board, believe it or not, you can be 40 and still have those same feelings of unworthiness. And so I think it's important for us to talk about things like this in these safe settings so that we can normalize the fact that there is this level of guilt that happens at every single level of our parenting. And hopefully our ability to navigate the guilt space becomes more bearable, and we can recognize it quicker as time goes by, and we can kind of nip it in the bud and give ourselves a level of grace in our parenting as time goes by. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely appreciate you saying that, especially the piece about normalizing it, because I think what happens is that we, especially as mothers or even just as like default parents, we always talk about default parents, right? And that could be anyone, but I think it's hard sometimes. It's just like you just do it, like you just do whatever, and if you make a mistake, suck it up, buttercup, you keep going. So I really like that. So I think we can dig more into it. Just how does that look? Like what has mom guilt looked like? Being a teen mom, being a not teen mom now, having an adult child and even a grandchild. But what does that look like? And then just kind of how have you navigated it?
That's a great question because, again, like I said, the guilt piece shows up at every level of parenting, and it shows up different, right? And of levels of guilt are dependent upon where you are and where you feel like you need to be. And so we always have this sense of I'm here, but I should be functioning here.
Mhm.
And so I think one of the best examples that I give my moms is Brandy is now in her third decade of life. For come on now, let's be honest
Don't
with the
age
people.
me.
Let's be honest with the people. So for literally the last 2 decades of her life, I would sit and before Brandy's birthday, I would have a pre-birthday party, but it would be a mom pity party. So I would sit in the middle of the floor. I would bring out every picture that I could find of Brandy, and I would look at every picture and I would be, I don't remember this. Who did her hair in this picture? Where did this outfit come from? I mean, everything that you could think of that made me feel bad about my absence because I was in school and at different levels of my education, not able to spend the amount of time with her that I had wanted to spend. So every birthday, before every birthday, every night, that was my ritual. And I did it faithfully until the point of Brandy's 30th birthday. So that was the year, Brandy, I don't know if you remember, you had gotten accepted back into UCLA in the master's program. And right like weeks before the birthday, I was ready to have my pity party. I had been collecting my photos because I was ready the night before. March 10th, I was going to sit in the middle of the floor. I was going to look at all the pictures. I was going to have some good, ugly cries. And I was going to talk about all the ways that I was absent because of being in high school and college and in medical school and not remembering these things. And I sat there and I thought to myself, I have a whole beautiful, wonderful, amazing, smart child who has gotten into one of the most amazing universities, go Bruins, this side of the earth, not the first time, but for a second time. And I sat with that and I was crying because I'm a crier. I was crying, but I was like, oh my gosh, they were happy tears. I was like, this is what I was able to give her. I gave her the gift of education. Education was super important to me. And that was what I saw as our way out of poverty, our way out of these generational traumas that had plagued our family. And so unknowingly, I had given her something that I never even knew I was giving her by my example of just her having to be there with me in school. And so I was able to sit up and say at 30, with her being 30 years old, oh my goodness, the things that I feel like I haven't given far underbalance this thing that I have given. And so let me start capitalizing on that. Let me start being present in the things that I have given. And so just really quickly, and my breastfeeding mamas will understand this. Very quickly, I want to just kind of explain to you what I explain also to my young moms. I tell them, okay, when you're breastfeeding, you remember you get this little very dark, very nutrient dense antibiotic, wealthy breast milk that comes out, but it comes out in little bitty spurts, right? So you are nursing and you're trying to get this. You think that as soon as you start nursing, you're supposed to get this overwhelming amount of milk production. You get this little bitty bit, and then you start feeling like, oh, I'm unworthy. I can't produce nothing. And oh my goodness, my baby's going to starve. Well, you have to remember when your babies are born, their stomachs are the size of a marble. So that very small amount of milk that you're producing not only is enough, but it's exactly what your baby needs for that phase of their life, right? Their immune systems are not formed. So they need those nutrients. They need those antioxidants. They need those antibiotics. And so if you think of it like that, and you think of exactly what my baby needs at this time is exactly what my body is producing. And as the weeks go by, my baby's stomach expands exponentially, but also my milk production comes in to meet that need. And so what they needed at birth is different than what they need at 2 and 3 weeks of life. And guess what? My body showed up and it produced that. It produced exactly the amount for exactly the need. And then when the baby needed something else, I'm going to be able to produce that as well. And when I have it, they'll get it. But what they get right now is exactly what they need. And so I think that if we really navigate spaces with that premise, right, that what we have to give for right now is enough, And when we have more time and when we have more finances and when we have more wisdom and when we have more resource, we'll give that. But it's okay to not have all those things on the front end. Just give them as you have them, and your baby will, absorb and expand and develop and progress in the ways that they're supposed to. So it's a journey, but it has been a beautiful one of learning that.
Yeah, I really appreciate and admire and am in a stage where I'm willing to accept that positive outlook looking back at it, because it's harder to look at that in the midst of that journey or struggle, however you felt. I know for me, two areas that I really struggled with mom guilt was one, the exposure with having a child as not so traditionally, as some would say. She has been exposed to different behaviors, different people, different lifestyles, and even behaviors from myself that I'm trying to work on and better. And the second part of the mom guilt, at least for me, was I know a big struggle for me, just being a young parent in general, was having the responsibility to teach my child the way of the world, the way the life works. And I'm still figuring out all those things myself. So, just for example, if I'm hollering too loud one day, or I don't handle a situation as I would have preferred to, sometimes I can feel really guilty about that. And even in turn, when my daughter resembles that, it is super triggering to myself, but it's also like educating me in so many different realms. But I am now in a place to see that, though, I can learn from these things, she also picks up the best traits of me as well. Kind of like you said, she's a hard worker. She's super polite. She's picking up different attributes that she's learned from me throughout my journey of learning these different struggles and guiltiness. And she in turns tries to keep me at peace with myself, just saying like, I can see you're doing a lot. And it feels so good when you're able to reap the benefits that you've put seeds in. And just with her just turning 8, I'm now at that point where I can move gracefully and confidently, knowing that what I'm doing my best is what I'm able to provide. And I put myself in those positive outlets where I can pick up new skills and learn from the lessons, and get away from those generational traumas that you just explained.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I can add to that too. I think what's interesting about like mom guilt and about this thing, and even what you're talking about, Divine, is that parenting, I've learned it changes every stage. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like I had guilt when, like my mom was talking about too, I had guilt when she was a toddler, right? And I was like, oh gosh, I shouldn't fuss at a toddler. Like, I fuss too much. And she probably doesn't even remember it. Actually, she doesn't when I ask her about it. And then, another stage of life. And now we're in preteen. And I'm like, maybe like every other day I go to bed thinking, okay, I guess we can try again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like constantly trying. And I had this moment even this week where she was having a moment about just like about gymnastics. It's her sport. She was having a moment, and I was trying so hard to fix it. And I think that's another thing that, I love for us to talk about. It's just like that innate thing that we want to just fix it. We just want our kids to not feel, a certain way. And we definitely don't want to be the reason that they feel that way. But that's not necessarily what they need, right? And so I had this moment, being a social worker and doing therapy. I know that you should be empathetic and you shouldn't try and fix it, and I know all the things, but when it comes to parenting, I'm like, that all goes out the window, right? And I
Mhm.
realized that um, it got to a boiling point. We're both frustrated and we're both triggered and we're both kind of going, back and forth. And really, she didn't need me to offer all of the solutions or all of the proof of why she shouldn't feel that way. She just needed me to listen, right? And
Mhm.
so it makes me just sit back and think, like, even, mom, like, I don't. My only memories as a kid was being attached at your hip. I don't remember you not being there, because I remember feeling like, no, she's always there and I'm going to cry if she's not, and she'll come back. Right. And so I think that speaks to like the secure attachment that we had, even though you felt a certain way, I experienced it differently. And my memories of it are very different. And so I think that's really interesting and important for us to know too, that our kids are going to grow and they're going to maybe remember certain parts, but the positives outweigh the negatives, and they're going to remember like, well, my mom was there and she showed up at every event, or she showed up to every dance recital or cheer competition or gymnastics competition or whatever it is, and she was always there and she always did her best. And I, as somebody on the other side of it, I can tell you that that's how we feel.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pooh. Thank you. As a mom on this side of it, you all haven't reached even the adult side of it yet, but I will absolutely attest to that. And there are times where I ask Brandy, I'm like, don't you feel, and I want her to remember what I felt when I was feeling these bad feelings about my absence. Don't you remember that I was absent, or don't you remember? And I'm trying to trigger these things in her that are not even there. And so it's like we have this level of need to feel guilty about things and to sit in our guilt and stay in our guilt. But I will tell you, even on this side of it, when you have an adult child, the things that they remember about what you poured so far exceed the things that they'll remember about what you weren't able to pour. And so if you pour this richness into them, whatever it is that you have, you're pouring from a space of richness. That really is exactly what you have to give them is exactly what they remember. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's nice to add to not only do the children go through these stages, but we as parents do as well.
Absolutely.
And that made me think of another thing. I know that previously we've talked about just the transition, like the transition of having, being a parent young, and then going through all the feelings that I'm sure that you went through having a child young, and then transition of like, then they're a toddler, then they're a teen, and then they're, an adult, and all of that. Can you speak more about just that transition and how you feel like you transform through that transition of parenting?
Yeah, I tell Brandy all the time that we grew up together, right? So I have this phrase where I say parenting Brandy / parenting mommy, right? Because as you are pouring into the growth of your child, oftentimes they're doing just about the same amount pouring into the growth of you, especially when you're young, and these parents who are under the age where their brain is even fully developed, right? And so you are developing and you're trying to navigate this space in life and trying to navigate it at your different stages of development. But then you're also trying to understand what the stages of your child's development are. And sometimes they mirror one another. Sometimes you're at a very similar stage. And so what you're pouring to them is also what you're trying to pour to yourself at that stage. And so it becomes a little complicated. I know that, one of the things that I always say is that you have to own your space and own your worthiness in that space, I guess, for lack of a better word. And so there is this way that we show up or fail to show up in spaces that will help us to either succeed in that space or not succeed in that space. I can remember the exact moment when I felt like I was a mom to Brandy. And I remember I was about 17 and she was 2, and I showed up at her daycare and a little girl had bit her on the cheek. Let me see, Brandy. Let me see. Okay, a little girl had bit her on the cheek, and all I could think of in my 17-year-old mind was the things that were important to me at 17. I'll be very honest, were, my baby's perfect face, and you bit it, and she's going to have a mark on it. So I showed up, and the teacher said, Dedra, just want to let you know that I'm going to omit her name to protect the innocent, but I still remember it. There's little Susie bit Brandy on the cheek, and it was okay. She was upset for a little bit, but we calmed her down, and there was just a little bit of bleeding, but we were able to stop it. And I remember even at 17, there was this thing that rose up in me, because whenever we have to protect and advocate for our babies, no matter what age we are, that mother gene will rise up in us. And I remember thinking, well, hey, wait a minute. Okay, where were you adults when this crime took place against my child? Like, where were you all? Then I'm like, well, little Susie, and what is going on in her home environment that makes her think she can just bite people? Should we send some people out there to just kind of explore what's going on in the home? And there were just all these things that I was like, at 17, I was like, oh, hey, where did that come from? And I remember leaving that interaction, they answered all of my questions appropriately. They did not send DCFS out to little Susie's house, but they were able to talk to me in a way that made me feel heard as a mom, made me feel understood, and I was okay with sending her back the next day, knowing that they were going to take care of her. And I just remember going home and thinking, where did that mommy stuff come up? Like, where did that bubble up? But exactly when I needed it, it came up. And I think that when we show up in these spaces as who we are and who our kids need us to be, it allows this level of growth in us as mothers, so that we show up as our best selves for them in the way that they need us. And then it allows us that next time to show up for them. And it can be a completely different situation, but that mommy gene is activated. And so then we have the confidence and esteem to, in all situations, say, I'm standing here as a mom, whether it's you face to face with your child and they're having a meltdown. It's like, well, wait a minute. I was a mom at the school the other day when a kid bit my baby. I'm a mom in this situation as well. Let me see what I need to activate in order to have this situation be successful. And I think as we do that and navigate that, it comes to us, and it's a natural thing that I believe comes to us as women when we bear children. So yeah.
You said something that made me think of, like, we need to title this From Guilt to Growth to Grace. Like, I just feel like,
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
it's a journey.
It is.
Other than what you said, which was super important about kind of changing your mindset of how you view things positively and what you internalize, how else did you cope with the feelings that you had during your parenthood journey? And what advice would you give to other young parents in similar experiences?
Yeah.
Coping is a very interesting space, right? And I think that because we give what we have, and oftentimes what we have is what we've been given. It's very interesting to cope in a space where you have to use very little, right? And what I would say is one of the things that I've started to come around to in my journey in parenting is that what my mother was able to give me was this level of support. I mean, she didn't have a lot of financial resource. She didn't have the educational resource, but she never made me feel, from the moment that I told her I was pregnant, or that she told me I was pregnant, she never made me feel, unwanted, that either me or my child was unwanted. She never made me feel ashamed. The first thing that she did was say, this is a hard situation. She used a different word for hard, because my mother, she's a G like that. This is a hard situation. I won't say it, Brandy. But we have to keep it moving. What did you tell me you wanted to do when you grew up? What did you tell me you wanted to be? How do you want to be for yourself and your child in 10 years, right? And so that's kind of one of the things that I also encourage my young moms to think about is, what kind of legacy do you want to leave to your children, right? If you have had trauma, if you have had hurt, if you are still hurting, if you just do absolutely nothing, from the time you become pregnant, that baby is marinating in the trauma and the hurt and the wounds. But if you choose, that you want a different legacy to be set forth, how do we show up like that person now? How do we fake it until we make it? How do we heal through some of these wounds that are going to need to be healed through for both yourself and your unborn child, and then your child? And so then we kind of start to think about what it is, where do we want to be, right? And even if we're not there now, if there's a huge gap, how do I start filling in the gap? Is it that I need therapy? Is it that I need a village? Is it that I need to take some classes? What is it that I need to do in order to fill in that gap? And then you just kind of have to start walking in it every day, because there will never be a space in this space between guilt and growth and grace that there is not some degree of a gap, right? So you can be a 45-year-old mom who has everything supposedly at their fingertips, and you're going to experience that there's a gap, right? So it is, how do I pour into that gap something that's rich and something that's meaningful, so that the gap isn't experienced by myself, and the gap isn't experienced by the child.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's super important. And you said something, you brought up trauma and things like that. And I wanted us to kind of talk a little bit about, because now you were blessed to be a parent super young, and then I was blessed to be a parent young. So you were blessed to be a grandparent when most people are becoming parents for the first time, right? Well, not most people, but that like normal age. And so people always say like the second child or grandchildren or however it works kind of get the healed version of you. And I sometimes joke that, Lyric is super spoiled by you because, you had like more at the point when you were becoming a doctor and all of these things. And so really like she could be your little baby, your little second baby. But do you feel like now being a grandparent, you are grandparenting and even parenting from a more healed space? And if so, what does that look like for you?
For sure. For sure. I feel like this season of my life, being able to be a grandmother, after having been a teen mom, I just always say, whoever said that there are no second chances in life did not first start off as a teen mom and then become a grandma, because really it does get to be this second chance in life. It gets to be, the thing where you can go back and rewrite the wrongs and undo some things. I will tell you, not just for the child, but really more for yourself. I think it always used to pain me that I could not afford to buy Brandy, the things that I thought that a mother should buy a child. Now, she had everything she needed, but I think probably the first time I ever bought her something was she was probably 2 years old. And that was just because that FAFSA, I filled out that FAFSA really well when I got to UCLA. So I had money for books and for tuition, and then I had some money left over for the cute little gymboree outfits, for the sandals that matched the bows. That was all FAFSA though. And so I can remember feeling this sense of not being enough because I couldn't give what mothers should be able to give. So when my granddaughter came along, honey, you could not tell me. Pottery Barn could not make the furniture fast enough for me to get it in her nursery. I really feel like her nursery was probably the most expensive room in our home for a long time. I mean, for a long time, because she had everything, but it was my way of going back and filling in the mommy guilt from teenage years and going forward and healing myself. And so I think that there's a part of this journey where I'm saying, let me go back and undo and right some wrongs, but also let me show my daughter this healed version of myself, right? So I get to show her through my relationship with her daughter what she would have gotten had I had all the things that I knew I wanted to have with her, right? And so it's very reparative in the mind, especially of a young mom, where again, we're talking about the brain is not even formed fully until we're 26, and that's in an ideal situation. So if you especially are a young mom with these ideas of what should be, not only are you getting to go back and to navigate these spaces in a way where you feel healed or whole, but you are truthfully touching on these stages of development that your brain maybe didn't fully functionally develop in. And so then you're able to show up in this space as a whole healed person, and to see the people see the healing and the wholeness. And that even just kind of pours back into me when I see Brandy kind of off to the side watching an interaction, or Brandy likes to take candid photos. So if Lyric and I are in an interaction and Brandy takes a photo, it does something to my heart space to say, oh, she sees me being healed. She sees me being whole. And that, yeah, it does something. So
Yeah, not to put you on the
I
spot,
love that.
Brandy,
I'm not
but
going to cry. I said I was not going to cry, y'all. I said
no,
it.
your relationship and dynamic is so full circle and precious. And not to put you on the spot, Brandy, but how does that make you feel hearing that? And, being a product of a young mother to being a young mother yourself, how do you internalize that in your parenting?
Yeah, I think, what's interesting is that I take a lot of the pieces that I remember from a kid. I don't remember unhealed versions of my mom. I don't remember her not being there or whatever. Like, I remember, like I said, her being there. I remember her bringing me hospital food when she had her little rounds in medical school. And I remember every single Christmas and every single birthday getting exactly what I wanted, and like calling my cousins and bragging about all the things. Like, I don't remember not having, right? And I also feel like um, sometimes as single moms, and we're all single moms here too, right? There's this overcompensation, and I think that I have always parented from a place of like, I'm just going to give my daughter everything, even if it's my last, the tree is full, her birthday is full, and I, am going to show up to everything, and I'm just always going to be there. But then I had to sit back and realize, like, I feel like as a single mom, my mom didn't have to do all of those things for me to feel loved or valued. Like, yes, I love them because I was a kid, but she didn't need to do that, right? But I realized that there's an overcompensation sometimes when there's not another parent that's always active, or there's not another thing, or you don't have the house with the white picket fence and all of the things that we feel like our kids need. And so I think for me, I've had to recently give myself more grace when I say no. Took my daughter's phone this morning. She was late to school, so she didn't get a phone, right? Usually I'd be like, oh God, I feel bad about all these other things. I didn't have this like perfect life for her. So just fine, like do whatever you want to do, right? But I had to take a stand and also say, like, it's okay. She's gonna be mad, and she's not gonna feel any less loved. And I'm giving her everything that I can give her. And so I think that I parent from that space because I was parented from that space. It was like we were always together. We were always like thick as thieves. Like, as anxious as I was for my mom to leave, that's as anxious as I am for my daughter to leave. So they're both tethered to me on both sides, right? Like, you can't go anywhere, you can't go anywhere. Like, you both get to just sit next to me. And so, yeah, I think, I'm always growing and evolving, but I'm always thinking back to like, oh, I remember that as a kid. And that's probably why I do that. But I wonder if my mom was doing that because that's what I needed, or she was doing that because she wanted to prove that she was a good mom, and I sometimes feel like I do things to like prove that I'm a good mom, or prove that I'm a worthy mom, or, never ask for help because you're a young mom. So you did this to yourself. So you have to like figure it out. And I remember seeing my mom figure it out. Right. And I remember us figuring it out together. And so, yeah, I think all the best parts of me, all of the like decorating for holidays and like super thoughtful gifts and super thoughtful experiences, I definitely got from her too, you know.
Yeah, I think that's so important what you said. Tackling on top of imposter syndrome, mom guilt, your intentions as a parent, it might you don't want to hurt your child's feelings when disciplining as a single parent, or, standing your ground as a single parent, but your intentions really, go a long way and make all the difference. And just knowing, you're trying to teach your child a lesson, or, you're trying to show them love and in an appropriate and healthy way. So I just think that that really was so important that you said that, because I know a lot of the times what grounds me in my mom guilt is just knowing that I'm trying my best. And like you said, doctor, you know, being able to provide what you can, and that's all you have the capability and ability to do to survive and make it through the next day. So I think being intentional is just super important.
I think you're absolutely right with the intentionality just in life in general, but definitely in parenting. I think that your kids feel your heart space, and really that's all kids want, right? They want the hearts of their moms. And so when you parent it from your heart space and you are really just desiring to do good, that's what they feel. They don't feel the lack. I also want to touch on what Brandy said regarding parenting solo. I think that so many moms who have to parent alone have that same sense of overcompensation. I think that it is something that comes from a space of guilt and trying to stand in the gap for the parent who is absent. But being on this side of that, as a mom who did that as well, I can tell you that is not the space of feeling that the hole in the heart is going to come from. They're not going to say, I have more stuff and I have more, phones and I have more toys under the tree, and that fills the void from that other parent. You have to love from the space of loving from one person, because you are one person, and allow, maybe put them in situations, whether it be therapy, whether it be a village of people who, meet the needs of what maybe a male figure would have met, or a female figure if mom is absent. But really stop trying to do things all from a space of your own self, because that's exhausting. And then you give your kids not the full parts of you, but you give them the exhausted parts of you, and you give them this idea that having more things and having more experiences actually fills in for the lack of love from that person. And it doesn't, because if they grow up and there is that void from the other parent, that void still is going to have to be addressed, right? In a more intentional way, again, whether it be therapy or God or whatever it is. And so you have just now done and given and given and given and done to a space where you are raggedy and tired, and it still is not going to fulfill the need that that child needs. But I speak from now somebody who is wise but did it, in a hope of helping somebody else. Not that it's an easy space to navigate at all, but it is not the right space to come from, because it doesn't do you or the child any good. So thank you for saying that also, Brandy. And please give my baby her phone back, because listen, I need to text her something. I have something to tell her. Something to tell her.
Tell her through me.
You know, Divine.
I
She always
feel
wants
you,
to.
and we're gonna have another episode where we
Yes.
really focus in on grandparents, because that's a whole another conversation of its
Yes.
own. And I know my mother will be ready for the tea.
Yes.
Bring her on. Bring her on.
Let's do it. Well, I just want to first thank you so much for joining us. I think that this has been super rich. I think it has, for me, it's even healed a little part of me and given me a little bit more like juice to go do, pickup, and to, be okay, and to, not be guilty about the morning or the yesterday or whatever. And so I think I appreciate you both for sharing. But I want us to leave, if there's like one piece of advice or one just last thing that you'd like to share with our young parent community before we end for today.
Yeah. Can I go first?
Absolutely.
Yes, it's you. Your show.
Okay. Hey. Let me see. Well, I love the saying, and you guys have probably heard it: the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. So one of the things that I like to encourage my young moms is that you are that hand that rocks the cradle, right? And you are so capable of pouring into, more than anything, the character of your child, right? With the authenticity of who you are as a mom, not trying to be who you think other people need for you or want for you to be as a mom, but really the authenticity of the you of you, and the love that you have to give is able to pour into the character of your child in such a way that they actually create these communities, and then ultimately this society that produces a better world. And so stand in the honor of the fact that your rocking is actually producing such great fruit. Straighten your crowns, rule this kingdom that you have of your household, and really know that you're doing really great things. You're doing great things for yourself and for your child, things that really are world ruling things. So don't sit in a space of guilt over what you're not doing. Rock that cradle with grace, rock that cradle with strength, and feel empowered going forth that you're producing little humans that are going to be amazing souls just by virtue of who you are. So that is my piece of advice to everyone.
I love that.
Thank you.
You're
And thank
welcome.
and thank our viewers and our listeners as always. Send us messages. You can ask questions. We can get them to Dr. Beckles, aka Mommy. And until next time.
Yes. Enjoy. Bye, guys.
If you enjoyed the Up podcast, please subscribe, share, and leave a comment.
And visit youngunitedparents.org for the information, community, and resources young moms and dads need to thrive.